Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Glam Bodybuilding, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about whether you should be concentrating more on the stretch of a muscle group or more on the contraction. And sometimes you do have to choose between one or the other because some exercises will accentuate one over the other, and sometimes different types of tension such as constant tension versus free weight tension can play a role in how the forces play out, right? So sometimes you're doing a certain movement and you feel next to nothing in the contraction side of the movement when it comes down to the muscle you want to hit, but at the bottom you feel a massive amount of stretch, right? And then another exercise you might feel most of the tension during the contraction part and very little tension during the stretch. So sometimes this will play a role in what you decide to do. And in the end, like I said, I'm not here to say whatever you're doing isn't right, especially if you're getting results right now. But what I want you to do is just listen to what I have to say in case you're not getting results that you're looking for, and maybe this will give you a hint that will take you in the right direction or in another direction that may assist you with getting results. Now, I just want to say there have been times where I've been training, sometimes around injuries. Like I talked about some of my injuries from hockey and stuff. There have been certain times that a certain movement or an exercise was perfect for me for a long period of time, and then of course the situation has changed or something has changed in my life, such as an injury, and then I need to do something different in order to get the same type of muscle activation. And so what I want to say to you is that there are different exercises or different ranges of motion or different areas where you feel like you'll hit a muscle group, and sometimes as things change or life changes, then sometimes that same exercise no longer works, and then you need to change it up, or you need to change the way you did things to get your results in order to continue to get results. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? But that's really what happens. This game of bodybuilding is a constant journey of adaptation. And unfortunately, just because something worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to continue to work, especially if you have like a labral tear in the shoulder, or maybe a muscle tear, or some sort of rotator cuff injury, or maybe the body's sitting different than before. And this is through no fault of your own, like it can't be rehabilitated back into the same state as before. So what I'm going to say to you is, when I trained regardless of what was going on with my body, what I found was, if I'm going to compare stretched tension as opposed to contraction tension, like where I got the most results from, mostly for most muscle groups, it was during the stretched tension part of the movement. Now, where people get caught up and messed up with this is that they mix up range of motion for an individual exercise with stretch on a muscle group. And we all know that sometimes when you're doing a compound lift, through a certain range of the motion, you may feel stretch in one muscle group. And then when you go beyond that range of motion, then the stretch may transfer to a different muscle group. For instance, I feel this a lot with bench presses. If I come down past a certain point, then because of the way my shoulders sit in the joints, I notice that my front delt starts to stretch a lot more than my chest, right? It's almost like my chest is stretched out, and now the shoulder starts to rotate, and now the front delt starts to get more of the stretch. This may be different for you, maybe different for different people, but what I'm saying is range of motion for a given exercise doesn't always have a perfect ratio to stretch of a given muscle group that you want to train. Because during compound exercises, we're training different muscle groups, and sometimes that stretch transfers from one muscle group to another. And therefore, this leads me to my main point, which is that when you find the range of motion where you feel the stretch on the main muscle group you want to hit, you want to stay in that as much as possible for the most part. I'm not saying to never do contraction exercises, but what I find is that if you make sure you at least include that stretch of that muscle group in that exercise and concentrate on, that's where you focus your failure reps. Like, so if I'm staying in a certain range and I'm actually hitting failure, feeling the particular muscle group I want to hit, I'm feeling the stretch in that main muscle group, what I'm going to be doing is guaranteeing that I'm going to be getting results in that muscle group. One standard sort of exercise that I've been doing lately, and I've been getting some good results with it, is the standard bicep curl with dumbbells. And I come down to stretch the bicep brachii, right? But if I come down lower, I notice that my brachii doesn't stretch anymore, but what I start to do is transfer the stress to the brachialis, right? Basically the forearm muscle and the muscle here. So by doing a lower rep or doing a greater range of motion, I'm actually reducing the time that I am spending in the stretch portion of the bicep brachii, right? Because there's not much point in a muscle being stretched if the tension is leaving it in order to do so. So if I hang the dumbbells at my sides and I'm not keeping tension on the bicep brachii to do this, I'm actually giving my bicep a bit of a rest. And if anything, I may be engaging other muscle groups to stabilize the shoulder and so forth. So what I find is that you want to keep that stretch on a certain muscle group in order to get the most results. And I've done that with this. I've also done it with chest flies lately. And this is interesting because I just started messing around with super micro reps, because I talked about this in a couple videos ago. But basically I started doing flies, and rather than coming up all the way, because I noticed that sometimes I get irritation in the joint, and I also start to get too much shoulder fatigue when I'm coming up all the way, I just started to stay just at the bottom portion of the movement, just doing an inch or two up and down, just like this. And I noticed that I'm feeling the chest the whole time with very little shoulder engagement. It's only once I come past here that I start to get a lot of shoulder engagement. And I noticed that my chest is absolutely totally destroyed for a few days after. So I've really basically broken down muscle tissue where I want to hit it. Now again, I'm not saying this technique is perfect for you, because you might have healthy shoulders. You might not have a torn labrum like I do, or a partial bicep tear from a long time ago. You know, you might not have these issues, but because I have these issues, I had to change my strategy around how I hit that stretch in the chest and maintain positive failure from such range of motion where there's a stretch on the muscle group. I hope that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? I want to keep the stretch on the muscle group and the constant tension on the muscle group. So stretch and constant tension on the muscle group I want to hit. Even though I might have more range of motion left in the tank, maybe I can actually go even lower. But if I'm going lower and that stretch is now leaving the chest and transferring more so to the delt, I'm not necessarily keeping the tension on the chest anymore, because now I've transferred the tension to the delt, right? So you're going to notice that there's a subtle difference between range of motion and stretch of a muscle, and finding the difference between those two things is going to help you really strategize to find the perfect exercise for a given muscle group that might be lagging behind. And this has been working for biceps for me. So I find that I'm really keeping the muscle tension on the bicep during the bicep curl without transferring it to, you know, the shoulder muscles, trying to stabilize once the bicep starts to relax at the bottom, and also not transfer the tension to the bicep brachii, right? So I'm noticing that there's results from this, and I'm getting results in other areas because of this as well. So you're never too old, or you've never been in this game too long to get results. And sometimes you need to change the strategies that have always worked for you, so that way you can get results now with what's happening with your body right now. And this is the hardest part about this whole thing, is that you can't stick with philosophies that worked before, because your body is an ever-changing machine. It's ever-changing. It's always in flux. So as your body changes, your strategies will need to change. Sometimes this applies to diet, sometimes this applies to exercises, and it will definitely apply to exercise technique when it comes down to strategies that you need to use in order to access certain muscle groups, especially if you're feeling like you're losing touch with those muscle groups, especially if you feel like other muscle groups are taking over in the exercise rather than the ones you want to hit failure. So yeah, this is kind of a deep video again. I don't know. This is more interesting for me to talk about these days rather than just standard, hey, here's how you do a bench press, you know what I'm saying? I probably would have a lot more views if I just talked about simple concepts, rather than just this complicated stuff for you advanced mountains out there. But you know, but thank God I got a good marketing plan. I got lots of business sense. You know, I came up with an exercise stick for beginners. Here it is. Here's the exercise stick for beginners. Just send $59.95, okay? Because it is a specialty stick. It's very light. You know what I'm saying? Light, convenient, mobile, portable. You know what I'm saying? You can put this in your carry-on luggage. You could put it in your bag, your backpack. No matter where you are, you can get a training session in. I mean, you can go out in the middle of the woods like this, you know, also just do a couple arm curls, you know, just bring this stick with you, because, you know, obviously there won't be other sticks like this in the woods, you know, this is a specialty stick, right? And there you go, right? So convenience, fitness, all wrapped into one. And this is how I'm supporting the channel. You know what I'm saying? You guys can just buy an exercise stick for $59.95. You know what? Let's make it $69.95. Why not, right? Why wouldn't we? $69.95, and therefore you can have your very own exercise stick, and you can exercise anywhere you want, and cast a few Harry Potter spells too. Like you can't get a PR today, just go like this, Leviosa, instant PR. See, possibilities are endless with this stick. Get it at naturalgallantbodybuilding.com. Mountain.